Hey, it's Kevin Mullen with the 419 podcast. Mark your calendars for Wednesday, February 7th, and come on out and see a live recording. Join Gretchen DeBacker, Matt Killam, and myself at Toll House from 6 to 9 p.m., where we'll be welcoming in 2 special guests. I don't know who they are, only Gretchen does. So come on out to Toll House Wednesday, February 7th to find out and be a part of the fun. RSVP online at 419podcast.com. Now let's get to the podcast.
Hi, I'm Gretchen DeBacker.
And I'm Matt Killam.
And I'm Kevin Mullen. And this is the 419.
And we put the music in.
It's right here.
Okay.
So good.
See what I just did there?
That's a top 10 hit right there.
Oh, damn it. Now it won't go away. Nothing we can do about it. You just got to let it run. Now it's just going to run. It's just going to do its thing. What are we doing here on the podcast?
We are going to talk to a different guest every week.
You're goddamn right. And then we're going to solve crimes. I should have gone with that music.
He's the private dick would get all the chicks. What's that?
What?
You know, that show. Shaft, he knew what I was saying.
I know Shaft, and I didn't know that was part of the theme song.
I don't think
No, they say it in between the verses. Mm-hmm. Come on, man.
I don't know.
Richard Ramsey recently passed, so it's certainly timely.
Yeah, I am still in mourning.
Let's start this from the beginning.
Anyway, this is over. Oh.
So this is going
today to tell you we're quitting this podcast.
Just when you think you couldn't think worse
right.
of yourself.
But that music will pep you right up.
Here comes the 419 disc.
Right.
Cheer you right up.
Okay, so it's my guest this week.
Yep.
Shall we start?
Let's do it.
I think he might be hiding right around the corner.
All right.
Okay, so I've known this person for a while. It's a man.
Okay.
He's a man.
Okay. Jesus Christ.
He went to St. Francis de Sales High School.
Okay.
Uh-oh.
Which may indicate to you how long I. Oh God, did you hear that? That was me.
Yeah. Don't do that.
Is it Shaft?
Him. No, he's not Shaft. And he's just a good guy. He could be described as the Walter Cronkite of Toledo.
Okay.
It could be. He could be.
Would he be?
He is a news anchor on WTOL.
Okay.
News. He took over a show for another local legend, Jerry Anderson.
Okay.
And our special guest is Jeff Smith.
Jeff Smith.
Hey. What you didn't say about our guest is our guest may be one of the best public address announcers in town as well.
Is that true?
You left that part out.
I didn't know that about him.
St. Francis basketball games?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I mean, I know my local announcers.
Okay.
I keep
Jeff,
an eye on the
welcome.
competition.
Welcome to the pod.
Thanks for having me.
I'm sorry we're going to waste the next hour of your life.
That's right.
That's all right. It
Okay.
keeps me out of the afternoon meeting.
Yeah. Now, do you know Matt Killam?
I don't know if we've met
So,
over the
yeah,
years.
it's a pleasure to meet you.
Nice to see you,
Absolutely.
You obviously know Kevin.
Of course.
Jeff, good to see you.
Yeah.
And we've met.
Yeah, quite a few times.
So how did you end up as the news anchor on WTOL?
Well, after 20 years at 13 ABC, I think my body started to tell me that getting up at 2 a.m. Probably took about 5 years off my life. Over and over doing that for so many years. There were so many things that kind of, I guess, drew me to the morning and being up at that time. But after having 3 kids, after so many years.
Now, Jeff, you're only 22 years old. You look terrible.
That's right. Thank you. I appreciate that. We've only met, and you were my best friend in the world. No, it's one of those things. It's like after so many years, I decided I really needed to start thinking more about me and possibly looking for something new.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it just so happened the timing of everything was kismet. I mean, it worked out that the opening came at TOL, and my wife and I, we never in a million years thought that I would go to a nighttime, the polar opposite of the shit that I was doing before.
Sure.
It's been a nice transition.
Yeah,
Very
absolutely.
nice. Yeah.
Well, I will tell you, my wife and...
Hang on one second. We're having tech issues.
Oh.
Can you talk into your mic directly?
Check.
We got to figure out.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
That's better.
Okay.
I hate to do this, but
Jeff, can you leave?
Come back.
Hey, welcome.
Reset.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's a new podcast. We're going to have tech issues
Sure.
as we figure this out. And, I mean,
We had a few last night on set, and I mean, everybody saw how I manicure the back of my neck at one point during the show. So
Is that when you rip the cord out in the back of your neck?
No, it was one of those things, peripheral vision, and I looked down on the monitor, and I'm thinking to myself, as my mouth is reading the next story,
Sure.
in my mind, it's not the next story. It's simply, why did we just see the back of my neck?
Yeah.
Oh, no. So
don't you
what
just
is-
want to say that? Don't
I
you just want
do.
to say that on air?
I
like,
do.
like you all saw it. I know it happened.
Right.
Let's just talk
Let's
about
not
it
pretend.
together.
Let's not pretend.
And over the years, there have been, you pick and choose your battles. And over the years, there have been those moments, but I've also matured, and I understand that you just move on.
So what do you give up at 2 a.m. that you gain now working this night shift? What are the pros and cons of, because
Boy,
now
that's-
you stay up until like midnight, right?
Right. Yeah. It is, like I said, it is the polar opposite of what I was doing before. And what I gain, sleep.
Yeah.
That's probably number
Yeah.
one on the list. I guess the takeaways, the negatives would have to be, I've got 3 kids. One of them is a sophomore at Ohio State, and I've got a senior in high school and a 5th grader.
Okay, wow, that's a real range.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things. It's like I don't see the boys as much as I would love to on this schedule.
Mm-hmm.
When I was younger, when I was doing the mornings,
Mm-hmm.
I was going 5-6 hours of sleep a night.
Sure.
And I was able to go home in the afternoon. I was able to go to those practices in the evening.
Right.
When most dads and moms are available to help out with coaching and things like that. So that's the thing that I'm giving up right now.
I think the 3 of us probably have an idea of what your schedule looks like just from our jobs and sort of being around. But for folks that may not know,
Give me an average day.
yeah, I mean,
That'd be great.
give me the average day for somebody who's on the morning show, what time you're getting in and what that looks like. And then now that you're on at 11 o'clock at night,
Right.
how early are you getting in to start prepping for that?
Well, the funny thing was when we first started mornings, it was, the show will never go to 6 a.m., because we were only 6:30 and then to 7 o'clock, and then networks would take over. It went to 6 a.m. It'll never go to 5:30. It did. And eventually it went to 4:30 in the morning for the
my
Toledo
God.
market, which we thought was just asinine
No
at the
kidding.
time.
On air at 4:30?
Exactly.
Oh my God.
Are there actually, I mean, do ratings show that people are listening at 4:30 or
That's
whether
what's
watching
crazy.
at 4:30?
Well, I think what it is in the mindset of the business model, they saw an opportunity each half hour that you went on air. It ticked up the numbers for that
Sure.
next
It's just
half
volume.
hour.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it did. It worked. I mean, it was an equation, and it worked perfectly. But when you talk about the day and how that unfolded, I mean, you were waking up at 2:15, 2:30 in the morning. You were getting in at 3:30. You were prepping, but a lot of the prep really in the morning show is done on set while things are fluid.
Sure.
There's a lot of repetition, obviously, because you can only do traffic and weather. I mean, everybody knows getting around town is 15 minutes no matter where you go.
Right.
Right.
So there's not a whole lot of traffic to report outside of, unfortunate accidents. But the day you just spend there until 7 o'clock, and then you've seen it. People during Good Morning America, Today Show, whatever, you've got cut-ins, which is where you just do little snippets of news and weather, and you go back to the network. And then I was doing the noon show as well, which we were told at one point over at 13 ABC that would never go to an hour long, and sure enough, it
Sure.
did. So the evening has been the interesting dynamic for the last 3 years at TOL, is getting up with the boys, because that's really the only time I get to see them in the morning. They go off to school, and then maybe dad lays back down for like an hour or two, and then I try to stay physically active. I try to get out. I try to work out. My wife is in real estate, so she can set her schedule so that we see each other. But it's really just, trying to stay busy.
I think that's one thing that isn't intuitive to some people, is having your schedule not be the traditional one. It's difficult to be a functioning or participant in community, right? So when do you get your haircut? When do you, renew your driver's license? When do you see your kid? When do you have dinner with your whole family?
Right.
Or friends, God forbid, it be someone even outside your own household. Those things, people are, although there's a variety of schedules, but people, you become an odd man or person out. And that is very difficult between your 2 years, I would imagine. After a month, 6 months, a year, like when was the last time I saw my buddies?
It's crazy that you're bringing that up, because that has been so many conversations over the last few months.
Sure.
That is a sacrifice.
Yeah.
And it was before.
Kevin sacrificed that by not making friends.
It was actually way easier that way.
That's what makes his schedule pretty fluid.
Yeah, nobody invites me to anything. Yeah.
Just because they don't think you're available, or
They don't like it.
No, they don't like me. Yeah,
That's mostly
that.
But
Yeah.
no, but please, finish that.
No, I mean, as we dive in, it is truth. I mean, it is one of the things when I was on the morning schedule was I couldn't be there Thursday evenings.
That's
go
right.
out with the guys. Go do this. Go do
isolating.
that. It is. And now you're just not available in the evenings, period. So when you are available, that's when people are at work. And I've probably over the last 3 years, I haven't done a good job of trying to acclimate to lunch dates or things like that where you go out. It's just there's no perfect. Listen, there's no perfect schedule.
Sure.
And I'm not sitting here saying I'm not a representative of somebody else's life out there going through the same thing. But it's a life of sacrifice.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate.
I think as important as that is whether or not you get free coffee and snacks at the station at 2 a.m. or 3 or 4 or 5 a.m.
At that time, no.
What?
No.
That should be part of your
When
contract.
Keurig came out, I think after I left there.
Yeah.
So I don't know. But it is one of those things. It's like, you were. I remember when I was working at 13 and Tim Hortons opened right there at the corner of Dorr and Reynolds, and it was like,
Yeah.
It was like that moment where holy,
That's right.
It's the savior.
Someone's looking out for me.
Then you figured out, whether or not they were going to be open during the overnight hours at
Sure.
2 o'clock when you came in, and sure enough, they were. So that was the same. People would look at me and they're like, "Do you like their coffee?" And I'm like, "No, but you needed some
Availability.
type of jolt."
This show is
at
sponsored
that
by
hour.
Tim Hortons.
Oh,
so
not
thanks,
anymore.
Jeff.
This is an entirely Canadian audience we serve.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So Matt and I will occasionally fill in for Fred Lefevre on 1370, and I laugh that when I'm like driving to the station, Matt shows up like an hour and a half later.
That's right. That's when the talent shows up.
But when I'm driving in, like nothing's open, and I'm going in at 4:30, 5 o'clock, not 2 in the morning.
Right. So it's better now on this shift being able to see more life, more activity. You go in when the sun's up, you leave when the sun's down, and it was the opposite before.
At a risk of getting like really serious really quickly, I'm curious if you went back and talked to Jeff Smith, the senior at St. Francis, what advice would you tell Jeff, and would it be this is the right career or run like hell?
I was just there yesterday, actually, at St. Francis for they
I thought you
were
were gonna say
celebrating.
at the corner-
No.
At the crossroads of hell.
I found myself.
Good Lord.
They were celebrating the 15th water polo championship
Sure.
for the school and that program. I was a part of it, and
Cool.
we won 3 of them in 88, 89, and 90. And in fact, John DeSalle, my coach, was there yesterday because his son's currently on the team. But I think if I were to go back and talk to that kid, I would tell him, and I told the kids there yesterday at the assembly, I said, look to your right, look to your left. Make sure you hold fast to the people who are around you, because the network is so important. And because of schedules, I went to Indiana University where nobody else was going my senior year. So, I mean, there have been divisions as far as friendships are concerned and contacts and saying things like that. But maybe I just have done a poor job. I've thought about that. I hit 50 last year, and I thought to myself, I've just done a poor job of staying in contact with people. It's not anybody else. I've just done a bad job with it. And I think the biggest piece of advice I would give, and I've thought about that a lot over the last couple of years, is just like reconnect. Go back out there, find those people who you haven't talked to. Maybe it was awkward at one time, but now it's kind of like, you're on the. I consider
downward.
myself on the downslope,
Sure.
right?
Well, there's two things. We hold fast is actually sort of a mantra for a variety of reasons that we use around our household for just that. And one thing that younger Jeff Smith would have never listened to is it is inconceivable how fast time moves, right? And that's something you hear said when you're a kid, but you will, to those contacts, it's 2 months, then it's 10 years.
Right.
Like, oh my God, I can't believe it's been that long. In the same vein, I'm interested in St. Francis to Indiana, back to Toledo, and the family in between, certainly. But I'm always curious and maybe your schedule allows for this to be a little bit easier, but the boundaries and the amount of access that people think that they have or should have to personalities like yourself, right? You are a public figure. You deliver news, good, bad, and in between to us on a nightly basis. I'm interested in, I'm sure it'll be trite to you because you talk about this with some regularity, but you are a man and a person, you have a family. So people think that you should be more to them than potentially is healthy. How do you navigate that? Is that a constant part of being you going out to dinner and people want to come up and say hi? You're in an elevator and people just stare at you. I mean, that's a
good thing.
Talk to me about that.
That's one of the things that, my wife and I have had that conversation as well. I mean, we've been at restaurants before. One in particular, I found a fake fingernail in a salad, and I remember her kicking me under the table, going, "Smile," and I'm like,
yeah.
We're people. It doesn't matter what I do. I just found a fake fingernail in my salad.
Right.
What do I do about that? How do I handle it?
Was it Tim Hortons? Because we can get
It wasn't Tim Hortons.
We can get you a coupon.
It's one cream, shot of caramel. That's how I take it. No, I always use this phrase, and I live by it. I am a walking billboard. People are walking billboards, no matter what they do. Mine just happens to be a little more visible, right? And if I have a moment at Walmart, if I have a moment at a Kroger, I smile.
Yeah.
I am approachable. I love when somebody says, "We saw this, that, or the other," because one, it means they were watching.
Yes.
And that's the business I'm in. I'm hoping that we're drawing eyeballs. I'm hoping that somebody feels comfortable with me.
They chose you.
Watching me.
For sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Not what we cut out.
Let me step on that. One of the things.
For God's sakes.
One of the things. No, and this is to your point. One of the things that was told to me coming over to TOL was this audience, your audience that you're going to, no offense, they have no idea who you are. Because there's that audience who grew up with me, my goodness. And I can say that literally because I've 20 plus years on the air, and I've got high school students who have told me I'm now, working, and I grew up watching you, blah, blah, blah. But they said to me, they're like, you were the morning guy. Now you're being reintroduced to an entirely new audience because they weren't up at 4:30
Yeah, it's a different station and a totally different time of the day. Completely polar
Gretchen.
opposite people. So it's two things, Matt.
That's
at
right.
the same
That's why she's on the show.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is, God bless you.
I hate you so much.
So good.
Jeff, what do you spend your time on in the community? Do you, is there a cause that you like to volunteer your time for regularly? An organization in the community that you're involved in?
You'll find this interesting. I reached back out last year. I reached back out to Sylvania Area Family Services because the Huntington Center, when I was growing up in high school out in Sylvania, I did my senior project out there, and it's always been some place that I've stayed in contact with. They had a Ray of Hope Awards that they did every year over at Meadowbrook Place. I hosted that for year after year after year. And Jason Robertson was the guy who brought me in for that. I got to give credit to him. But I always kind of looked back on those experiences because I'm a local guy. And growing up here, I mean, there were things that when we were in high school had an impact on our life. And whether it be Liz and me growing up and having different experiences, but her sister who I knew growing up. But it's just one of those things. I've always looked to give back to those who were so impactful and kind of made an impact on me when I was younger.
That's great.
Yeah.
I can't help but think, when the news business has changed so much in the 20 years that you've been in this business, and I think maybe even aggressively more in the last few. I'm curious how the, attack on news media, how all of that affects you both professionally and personally, because yes, you got a job to do. You're selling a widget that happens to be a newscast that, you make your money the more people who tune in and watch.
Sure.
But there's also a public service there that I think everybody who's in the business got into it, not because they wanted to help an ad agency or a sales rep sell advertising, but because they see the value of delivering news in an unbiased way to the community as a public service. How do you sort of wrestle with that, both professionally, how it's changed, and also just how does that impact Jeff Smith, the person?
Yeah.
And I would just add, if I may, rudely, the technology that's changed. I mean, the way you communicate and the methods you communicate, certainly, especially in the last 5 years, have completely and totally changed the way you do your job.
I taught down at BGSU a few years ago, and I remember bringing Kurt Frank from the Toledo Blade in to talk to the students, and he told them that day, he said, I never thought being a newspaper guy in a million years I would be doing as much video as we're doing.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. And to the polar opposite of that, we're doing more copywriting and newspaper type literature over at WTOL than we ever thought we would be doing, because, and I've told students this, broadcast journalism is about, you've all been trained. We talked to students, we're like, you've been trained to find the 499th word in that 500-word essay for decades. We're trying to get you to pare that down to about 50 words. So that's kind of the mentality. So yes, there has been that juxtaposition of what we thought we were getting into, how it exists now, because it is different. Absolutely, 100%. How does that change things on a daily basis? You asked specific to the news being hard, being difficult. And I had a classmate at St. Francis whose brother was tragically killed in New York City. And we got wind of the fact that ABC News was going to be covering that story, airing something. I may get this wrong. I think it was on 2020. I had to pick up the phone, and I felt as a courtesy, call the family, let them know that this was about to happen on the air. They had no idea. But it created a real... a hard moment, I'll just put it like that, as far as the relationship of this family that I grew up with in high school. I love them to this day. I saw the parents recently, and there's still that kind of unspoken uncomfortableness. But that's the hardest thing. I mean, I've had stories of people I know who have gone to jail, and I've had to make sure that I distance myself from those stories when they're read on air. There was a young girl, Notre Dame girl, at the corner intersection, was pulling out there on Sylvania near Talmadge. And this is when I first came back home, who was tragically killed in a car accident. So, I mean, I could go on and on. There have been numerous things that make this job not fun.
It's interesting. The longer someone stays, and this is in any market, right? But the longer someone stays in a particular market, the more connections they're going to have in that community, and the more connections they're likely going to have to the stories they're covering.
Which is a blessing and a curse,
Yeah.
Right.
My contact list, the people who I can reach out to who are more comfortable with me, trust me, that's a bonus. But like you said, it comes around.
Well, I can tell you anecdotally, I mean, this is the first time we're meeting, but you are a favorite of our household, for sure.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah, well, you've certainly earned it, and there's something about you that people trust and want to listen to. I don't want to keep talking about heavy media stuff. I certainly want to avoid Gretchen's tech question because that's not a strong demographic for us. But I am interested in things about you, Jeff. How did you convince your wife to put up with this? Where did you meet her? Where is she from? Talk to me about the family and how they are part of all the things to make you up.
She's from Fostoria.
Okay.
We met at 13 ABC. She worked behind the scenes.
Okay.
We kept it very low profile.
Sure.
Was HR involved ever?
No.
She was the head of HR.
So they were.
It really helped.
No, you said was.
Yeah, that's
she's not anymore.
That's
Yeah. No.
I think it was a shock to the system when people found out we were even dating, just because it was kind of a secret hush-hush kind of a thing. But her being from Fostoria, I grew up in Sylvania. We located in Perrysburg. We moved to Perrysburg because that was the even split between my parents and her parents, as far as distance was concerned.
It does help that you're sort of different and nutty lifestyle, she's like, yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
I'm a participant in this circus.
Well,
that's
she
true.
she was in media, she was in promotions, and then she started a real estate career back in 06, 05, I want to say.
Okay.
Right about the time the bubble hit,
Sure.
the first one.
Yeah.
So her getting into that, she learned just unbelievable amount of houses and investments being underwater and all that kind of garbage, I'll say. But it's been especially helpful. But as far as the family is concerned, I mean, we've got 3 wonderful kids.
Yeah.
I want to go back to something real quick because I do want to touch on this. You talked about things that are important to you and things that have made an impact in places I've reached out to. The one frustration I've had is getting national organizations, if they don't have a footprint here in Toledo, to take a chance and come back. The Arthritis Foundation is one place that I reached out to, and I wanted to spearhead the effort to get a major footprint. My daughter's got arthritis, and it's been one of those things over the years that I wanted that to be my calling card as far as going to bat for that effort. And it's just been frustrating. It's been multiple emails. It's been Zoom conferences and things of that nature. And that's one frustration. It's like Toledo has made a lot of ground over the years, over the decades. But
if to the 4 people who are going to listen to this, but one nice thing to your point about a market this size, and you are not very separated from people who can help or participate. From the Arthritis Association in particular, what can people do to help bolster your ask or your push to get more of a footprint here? What does the community need to do to support this?
Gosh, I think communication, obviously, from my side of things, I mean, that's the biggest thing, is to have more and more people kind of push the lever on it. But I move the lever, I should say, but I just don't know.
Right.
I mean, I think about conversations about bringing more grocery availability to downtown Toledo. I look at Meijer. They have a urban footprint. They've got a store in Grand Rapids, which I think would be unbelievable in downtown Toledo. But they don't want to talk about it.
Right.
And that's where that's from a community, a civically inclined person. You have to put that hat on for a second versus the news reporter. Are you calling about a story, or are you calling because you want to get something done?
Yeah. So, are you allowed to? So you say. So I think it's the idea of bias in the media. So I've always said that I think the problem with bias is when it's, or the problem with agendas is when they're hidden. Right? When you lead with the agenda and say, this is what my agenda is. Sure. I personally don't have a problem with that. When it's hidden, all right, now wait a second, what are we talking about? But I'm curious for you, when you're saying, look, why is there not a grocery store in downtown Toledo? All right, we're going to cover
with a bigger footprint.
We're going to cover all of these. I've met with Meijer, and they've said, well, Toledo doesn't check this box, this box, this box. And you're saying, but I think we do. So we're going to make a concerted effort in our newsroom to cover stories to let them know that we do check those boxes. Like, is that something that can or maybe does happen?
Of course. I mean, we live here, right? And I mean, I think it would be unfair to say that we can't go to the table each and every day and say, I think we should pursue this, because it could be timely. Yep. It could be something that we start a conversation, and I have no problem with that. I think when you say the word bias, immediately political comes into it. But what you're describing right there, and what we're trying to gain as far as quality of life opportunities for the region, social determinants of health, you've heard that used again and again and again around Toledo. But as we're trying to get those things, we want to be a vehicle for that. It's not, I don't see any negative in doing that kind of thing, right? And we can scan, we can fish social media and figure out what people are talking about, what people are asking for, and we can be that sounding board for that. But to take stuff of our own volition and say, I think we should do this, absolutely, I'm 100% for it.
I really love that philosophy. I think that's important, especially like you said. you all live here. This is your community too. It makes sense. What is your favorite
and I'll bring up the point. I had you on a couple 20 under 40. That was my idea. Was to focus on that effort here locally. And obviously, as you being a winner of the first ever one that came out,
I'm very young still, though.
I thought, no,
I was
we
like,
know that.
You're under 40?
All right. Yeah. That was inappropriate.
But that plays to our point, is just the opportunity to do things like that, to have that vehicle.
What's your favorite kind of local story to dig into? You want to get into like the finances of something,
Be the Metro
about
Parks.
a character, something about the Metro Parks, which you might
better
know
be the
Matt works.
Metro Parks.
Some like a scandal type story, a development story, heartwarming.
Boom. Development. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Where opportunity is, and just I've talked with executive producers before, and I've said I just think we have a lack of innovation stories that we do nightly. I'm so glad going over to WTOL. One of the things that I thought we did not do a good job of over at 13 was ag stories, agriculture. How big that industry is for Northwest Ohio and Southeast Michigan. Dan Cummins does a great job, has great contacts, goes out. Paul Kwapik, our chief photojournalist, he's just got a vision for these things. So every time there's something like that on the air, it gives me chills down my spine. I love seeing it because it kind of it calls to what I think we need to I guess share as far as the community is concerned. But development stories, what the Metro Parks are doing, all of those things where we're bringing in something new and shiny and an opportunity, quality of life, I'm all over it.
Jeff, when you are...
I'm more fascinated by the people who are doing it.
Okay.
I want to put that out there
absolutely.
as well.
Yeah, that is what the connective tissue, I think, is in most things of interest is the topic or the subject matter, of course, but the individuals who make it.
Who's taking the ball?
Absolutely.
Right.
Is there an individual or person that you feel like you're talking to through the camera? I think it's Howard Stern.
Yeah.
Howard Stern talks about, I think he thinks about one audience member, and it was himself as a kid. He was into radio. So in theory, and this might be super trite, but who is the audience for which you are speaking to? Do you think about that, or is it you're delivering content and making sure the content itself is respected and represented?
My managers remind me that probably the female demographic 54 and up is kind of my demo right now.
Yeah. Right. So
How does that make you
love it.
feel?
Well,
So Gretchen,
I'm 53.
yeah. Oh, that's right.
You just missed it.
So I just
missed
but
it.
that's why I'm here today. I'm trying to win over one more convert.
Started early. That's right.
I love it.
But
That's hilarious.
that is, there's no, I can't say yes. There's one specific
that's fair.
person that I'm thinking, that I'm talking to. But I want people, and I've always had this approach. I just want people to know there's no BS, and there's no. I want them to get a little bit of my personality. I mean, it's funny when I came over. People have said to me, they're like, "You're funnier than we thought you were," and I'm like, "Well, thank you."
And I was thinking the opposite. Yeah, this has been a real letdown. I cannot wait to tell my wife. What a disappointment. When
you want them. You don't want to give it all, but you want them
course.
to have a little bit of what you're about and who you are, right?
That keeps them,
Yeah.
right? You can hear or listen to radio or news, period, right? Keeping them, they get to make a choice, and they make the choice based on who you are, presumably.
Right.
And that's important.
Right.
When you yell at your children, is it through... talk to me about that, Jeff Smith. Do you prepare for that?
I'm the dad who takes fun away.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very curious about that.
But do you do it in a news style? Like, do you
with that
deliver
voice.
breaking news, my daughter got her cell phone taken away.
The garbage is still not out.
It's time to do the
Film
dishes.
at
With
11.
sarcasm, right?
Yeah, no, I just love the idea of parenting is a nightmare almost on a daily basis. Also with some real highlights, of course.
I am continually reminded I'm the only one who can take our dogs for a walk.
Sure.
Because I am the only one who they will behave for.
Okay.
Not to end my sentence in a preposition there. All the students are going
We
to
were
be
doing
upset.
a lot of judging.
Yeah. So that's one of the things that I'm always reminded of as far as the tone.
Sure.
The tone is, I think that is, they know when dad means business.
Yeah, I bet.
But God, it's like the workplace. It's like home.
But they don't really care what you do for a living, right?
Right.
They don't.
No.
They don't think it's like cool.
They think it's cool.
Oh, they do think it's
they
cool.
do think
Okay.
it's cool.
All right.
Yeah.
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 That's
We're still
awesome.
talking about the dogs, right?
Right.
Yeah.
That's my audience
Well,
when
he
I get
doesn't have
home.
any actual children. It's these three just delightful labradoodles.
They're human-like.
I've got a comfort dog that's a sophomore at Ohio State.
That's right. Sending them off to
Second year.
school, he was heartbroken.
The tuition is the same, unfortunately. Right.
I do want to try and get away from work a little bit because I know there's more to Jeff Smith than what we see on TV, but I am really curious. What's your favorite story you've ever covered, and what's
good question.
the worst story you've ever covered? And maybe not like let me
Worst, like
let me
sad,
take off work.
tragic.
Yeah, let me take
Yeah.
off worst, sad. Just
Yeah.
like you did.
Toughest.
You did it, and you were just like that wasn't my best.
Oh.
Like
That's fair. Best probably, gosh, and I have to go. I mean, there have been so many. I went down and covered a hurricane down in Houston when I was at 13, and we were still owned by Disney at the time. And all of a sudden, they put in the All Points Bulletin. They needed employees from all the O&O stations, Disney-owned stations, to come and help because they were going wall to wall for 5-6 days, never going off the air with coverage as far as what people needed, what kind of damage they were
Status,
seeing, that
sure.
kind of thing. And I remember myself and photojournalist Kevin Bining going over to one of the shelters that they had set up, and just the human impact of being able to, I guess, take the veil of being a TV personality or just being a reporter that day. Yeah, we were holding a microphone, but I remember Kevin being on the other side. There were tables lined up vertically for people. It was a call center that they had set up so that people could get the help they needed from the Red Cross, so many other government organizations that had set up to help these folks that had gone through just horrendous damage. But I remember Kevin, I could feel him kind of moving behind me because of the emotion we were starting to get out of the person we were interviewing. And I was just talking as a fellow human being, just asking questions. What's this been like? Tell me about your family. What are they going through? And I just felt, Kevin, I remember talking with him afterwards, and he said, it was the emotion that got me. Because he was listening in from across the room. He was shooting. We didn't want to make the woman nervous. That's why he was across the room. But I remember that day specifically, and it stood out for me as how impactful what we do can be sometimes. Being that sounding board, being that megaphone to get people help. I started work in northern Michigan, and some of the experiences I had up there, and I'll give you one. I'll give you this short version of it. My job of the day was to get feed piles for deer. Get video, B-roll of deer at feed piles. A feed pile is what farmers or people who live out in the country will set up during the winter months when food is scarce and the deer are still out there. They will create leftovers like corn from earlier in the season or things of that nature. Compost they will put out in a pile. So it was my job to link up with a farmer, and I got lost. And I ended up driving on what I thought was a road, but because of the snow cover, I was on a snowmobile path that hadn't been groomed, or had been groomed enough to the point where I thought it was a road. I get stuck. And the cell phone not working because of the desolate area I was in and the time of year it was. So I ended up having two snowmobilers pass by me. Arctic Cats. I got to put a plug in for Arctic Cat because they had chains in the back of this thing. They ended up towing me out of this path.
Oh my God.
I finally did get to the farmer's house. And probably to this day, I can't prove it, but I bet News Channel 7 and 4 in Traverse City is still using my footage that I got that day as far as
Cautionary
B-roll
tale.
of deer.
I wish it was like a trap set by deer to kill you and eat you.
yeah.
They're like, right this way.
This nefarious plot in northern Michigan, just north of Gaylord.
You had to leave the state.
I remember like I had several like worst days when I worked in television. Because I wasn't nearly as good at it as you were, so I had a lot of them almost every day. But I remember
That's nice you say that, thank you.
I did one story where I was sent to interview a family, and it was my least favorite story. It's part of the reason why I got out of news is I just felt like I was constantly sent on this knock on their door because a loved one died and ask them how they feel kind of story.
And you want to do more deer
I want to do more deer content. That's what I want. I'm looking for more feed piles.
None of their business.
And so I go to this house and I knock on the door and I'm talking to the family and they agree to talk to me. And I set up to do that. I'm a one-man band. I set up to record the story and I realize that I don't have a tape to record it. And at this point, they are sitting down. They're ready to talk to me.
Oh my God.
I am not about to tell them, I'm sorry, can I come back in an hour?
Yeah, right.
And so we just do the interview. And I do the interview with no tape. And I go back to the newsroom and they said, how was it? And I said, so I got there, I sat down with them, I had a great conversation with them. I thought I had them ready to do an interview and they said no cameras. So I didn't get it. And I was like, I wasn't about to tell them
No.
I did not have a tape. But I was like, but I remember that was one of those days that I'm like, you got a checklist for a reason. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know what story that could have been. I do like in the business, I tried when I would do those stories to at least make it like marginally therapeutic for the family. That I'm not gonna. I don't actually want to talk about what happened. I want to talk about who it happened to and what you do now as a family. But it was like, man, that could have been a really good story if I'd had if I'd had the tape I needed for the camera.
I'll give you one more anecdote real quick.
Yeah, sure.
Northern Michigan, Upper Peninsula, there was a priest who had a communion wafer that had a red dot on it. And it was almost like a bubble. And they said at the time it was a miracle. Mm-hmm. They said the communion host was bleeding. So I went up to cover that. Long story short, the day I went to cover it and I shot a bunch of videos of that communion host, the wafer, when I got back to the editing bay to look at my footage, everything on the front end was fine. Everything on the back end was fine. The thing I shot of the communion wafer was snow.
Wow.
Really?
And to this day, I can't explain what happened. It may have been a dirty tape. It may have been my camera acted up at one point.
It was a miracle.
But that still sticks with me because of what the story was and what happened when I got back.
That we're hoping that will happen for the content of this podcast. Is we'll introduce you and just be radio silence until we sign off this.
Well, Jeff, I really admire what you do.
Same.
I don't think I've ever told you this or anyone. I don't even think I've ever told Matt this, but I was a broadcast journalism major for about 20 minutes in college. At Kent State, there was a television station there. And I wasn't the anchor person. I was the person that came in and did the side personal interest stories on the side. But after the semester, I messed up so many times. Like I wouldn't know when the camera was on me. And so at the end of the year party, they played the blooper tape and I was in it like 19 times. One time I was sitting there like picking my nail. I mean, it was horrible. It was absolutely horrible. And so I abandoned that as a career, as a choice. But thank you for coming in.
That blooper tape ruined everything.
I wish I had it to this day, but I don't. But it's a tough gig, so we appreciate you doing what you do.
It's a pleasure to meet you in person. You do a great job, and it means a lot to a lot of people, so I hope you're equally proud.
I am.
Good.
I am. I'm having a blast.
Huge thanks to Jeff Smith for joining us on the podcast today, and thanks to you for listening. We'll be back next month with more 419. For Gretchen DeBacker, Matt Killam, I'm Kevin Mullen. See you next month.